Yo, what's up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to do a quick recap up on the Carrion Golem Summoner, see how it's doing, and I'm also going to show you guys the crafting guide we've put together for you guys for both this build and Cold Blade Vortex. And you guys can take a look, it's a step-by-step guide on how to make all of the best gear for this build. So pretty awesome. Let's get into it. So, Carrion Golems, how did they do? Well, let's take a quick look at the League Start experience. So, we league started Carrion Golems and it was an absolute breeze. So the real good thing about this build is that it has a very smooth power curve all the way up until about T14 to T16 maps. And that's the point where you really need to start getting some gear and going low life. But until then, it's incredibly powerful. So the leveling experience, we used TIE Killer's Necromancer Speed Guide, which was really nice. You can go check out his video. I'd highly recommend it if you're only getting to the character now. You can go through the story in about 4 or 5 hours. Even if you're not that experienced, as long as you know where to go and you know what gems to pick up, you can pretty much run it with white items. It's that powerful. And it's absolutely crazy that you can get so much power without having any gear. I really enjoyed that about the character. So you can get all the way up until maps and even into maps, just using that setup and kind of blow through T1 to 5 maps without any issue and just a few clay shapers. So you know, 1 or 2 C budget. Getting that tabular is also a big damage upgrade and it's going to let you get those Carrion Golems going. So very good. Nice. We got through all the maps and you know, we really blitzed the early game with this build. Now, I did actually was able to achieve my goal of getting a day 1 shaper on this build. Having said that, we were also able to go low life on day 1 through a very lucky link on the Shavs. But other than that, I think it's a very good league starting build and I would rank it a big old A. In terms of day 2, we were actually able to take down Maven and pretty much all of the rest of the endgame content, Uberelda, all that kind of stuff like that. We knocked it all out, and the only thing that took us a few more days was the Feared Invitation, just because, you know, farming up all the stuff for that and, you know, getting the courage to go in there was definitely something that it took a little bit of time for me. Other than that, though, the actual character is able to clear everything, and it did so fairly effectively. Once you get on the low life version of it, it's got incredible elemental mitigation and really nice regen using vitality. You can see there I'm just standing in Shapers and Beam there for the full duration, no problem. You know, that's due to the fact that I have a high level vitality and high elemental resistances, so it's a very nice build in that regard. So let's talk about a few things that I discovered about it though, which I wasn't expecting, and kind of like maybe that'll give you a bit of insight into the build as well. So it's got fantastic damage, you know, it's got pretty good defense once you get to low life, and you know, that's all good, and it was able to clear all content in the game. But as a minion build, you do have to rely on the fact that minions need to stay alive, and they of course have a very aggressive AI. They're going to run straight in there. Even if Shaper's about to beam them or throw balls at them, they're getting in there. They will face tank that stuff, and that can kind of become a bit of an issue on some of the invitations that do tens of thousands of damage per second to anything standing in its attacks. Particularly on the Breachlord invitation, the Feared invitation, and some of the map mods like the Cyrus influenced maps. That has a really big issue on your minions due to the fact that they just get in there, right in there, and they just tank all that damage. I wasn't expecting my Carrion Golems and anything else to die because all content in the previous expansion was unable to essentially damage them at all. Nothing could kill Golems in the last expansion, but it is absolutely not the case in the new expansion. Maps can kill them, and the bosses can kill them as well if you're doing those Breachlord invitations, and we had to solve that on the fly. So in terms of solving that, there's a few ways to make it so that your minions don't die. The first of which is you need to have renewal and replenishing presence on all of your cluster jewels. That is absolutely essential, and that is going to keep them alive for a lot longer. The other thing you can do though is you can actually equip a cold iron point if you're finding your golems die. That'll give you additional physical minion levels, and it'll give them a higher amount of life. It's just probably about 20%, 20 or 30% more life, which, you know, can get them over the line. And the more skill gem levels you have, the better. And another thing for that is though that if you're using the endgame amulet, you'll also get an additional 2 levels on your Carrion Golems, an additional 1 level on all of your other minions, which is going to tank them up some as well. One thing that was particularly annoying for me is my zombies. They would die on stuff like Uberelda. You know, it was kind of annoying to die on Phoenix. You know, it was kind of really annoying. So swapping over to the Hungry Loop as planned, though, it fixed all my issues. Using Minion Life, Elemental Army, makes them tanky enough to where they really don't die to much at all anymore, which is super duper good. Absolutely would recommend that swap as soon as you get enough attributes to do so. I bought the ring with all of the support gems already in it for about 150 chaos, so that was pretty easy. Very, very nice there. Also using a 21-23 zombie can definitely help them stay alive as well. In terms of specters, they don't die too much because they're not flagged as aggressive. The apes die here and there, but as long as you're not keeping them in a Phoenix Blast or in a Zeri, Flame Blast, they should be fine to survive as long as you're not doing Cyrus influenced maps or something like that. So pretty good. Moving on, what other things did I have an issue with? So one thing about Summoner is that I wasn't predicting the bosses to have so many just mechanic clutter. In terms of Maven invitations, that's the real thing I'm talking about here. The Maven herself and all other boss fights, you can kind of get into melee range and just stand on them and your boys kind of go to work. In Maven invitations though, it's actually incredibly difficult to stand near any of the bosses. Let's take the Shaper Guardian invite, for example. The bosses are there's just too many of them, and there's so many AoE effects that you have to constantly be dodging, and you can't get full damage out of your minions. One of the mechanics behind Summoner is that you have to stand near your target when you're trying to deal maximum damage to it, and I'll show you what I mean. If I go to the ledge here, we'll load up the ledge. You need to use Pride and Flesh and Stone, I think it's Flesh and Stone, to do maximum damage. It's going to be about double damage while you're standing near a target. If you're not standing near a target, you're going to lose about half your damage, and that is going to be a significant kind of impact on how quickly you can burst down targets. And whoa, bit of lag there. These Maven invitations actually are all about bursting down priority targets. When doing the Breachlord invitation, for example, you need to burst down either Tull or Esh before the others come out, or you're going to have some pretty big issues with massive amounts of overlapping AoE effects. So you can see here this red circle around my character. That's sort of the double damage area. If the target is in that area, that your minions are essentially going to do double damage to them, and it's going to be really good. If you're running around kind of trying to dodge everything around the edge of the arena, you're not dealing maximum damage, and if you'd normally do 20 million, you're only doing 10 million now, and that's going to double the amount of time that these targets survive. So definitely didn't foresee that as a summoner. Traditionally, you can just stand on your targets and that won't be an issue, but in like the Shaper one, you got like Minotaur is going to kill you, if you stand still, Phoenix is going to kill you if you stand still, so you have to constantly be moving, so you're going to lose some damage effectiveness as a summoner. What else do we have here? So we've talked about minions dying, we've talked about needing to be in melee. I think that's pretty much it. Everything else worked kind of as intended, with the only final thing being that minions were a bit more expensive than I was expecting, due to the fact that a lot of other people had the same idea to roll carrying golems as well. And, I was expecting the nerf to kind of soften the prices a bit, but that wasn't the case. Definitely still very expensive to roll this build. It may be a little bit cheaper these days, but yeah. Cool. That's how it is in League Start. That's kind of how it is in the end game. It's a pretty good build. Let's stack it up against the competition in terms of boss killing. So now that we're in kind of week 2, moving into week 3, how are we looking for the meta? So in terms of boss killing meta, I think it's pretty much as we expected. I would rank Summoner in, the top 3, whether it's zombies, specters, carrying golems, all of those things are probably about the top 3. As long as the minions survive, you can kind of kite all around the place and it's fine. It's very, very good for learning fights and doing fights on the fly, because you can spend all your time dodging. As long as your minions survive, you're good to go and you can kind of just keep running around. You have incredible defense and regeneration. It's very, very nice. In terms of what I would rank higher though, I've been saying it this whole time, Miner. Miners, in my opinion, are completely ridiculous in both the early game, mid game, and end game right now, and I think that they do actually edge out Summoners, but they require much higher mechanical play. You've got a lot of abilities, and they actually do have quite a high budget as well to get to the ultimate end game of agnostic mana miner. That'll be a discussion for another time though. In terms of everything else though, I think Summoner is definitely, again, as I mentioned, top 3. I'd probably place it at about 2nd. I'm not really sure if there's any other builds which have the utility and survivability and also the damage that Summoner does right now, although I'm sure that there'll be some that pop up. Some close contenders though are all the dot builds, cold dot, ignite, poison. All these things are pretty powerful as well, and then I'd put them in the top 3 as well. Maybe they edge out Summoner, not sure, but Miner remains the king. Absolutely. So that's kind of how it stacks up against the competition. You can also min-max the gear a little bit more than what I have. I'll show off what I have currently. So we can actually swap this out, as I mentioned, for the Cold Iron Point for more survivability. But on the ultimate endgame, you can actually get a Fractured Takati wand. This is a one that gives you big minion damage and double damage. And you can roll that with plus minion gems to give you more survivability and damage overall. You will give up 1 golem, but it will actually be worth it because you're going to net about 20 to 30% more damage by swapping to that wand. You know, we've got our helmet on here. We'll have a crafting guide on this one coming up in just a minute. You know, and we're using pretty much the end game gear here. There's a few things that need to be improved, but the main thing that we're missing here is just a Crusader ring, which is in the end game POB, which I linked. Other than that, though, we're pretty maxed out. Amulet could use a few more crafts. But other than that, we're pretty good. The only thing that I actually have to get to here on this character is the Abyss Jewels. The Abyss Jewels right now are about blue mod, so if you want to get some of these Abyss Jewels, the way to get it is actually to alteration spam or use harvest or something like that to get a blue Abyss Jewel base like this one. It needs to essentially look exactly like this. And then once you have one, you can actually duplicate this infinitely using Bestiary. You can use a Kragit Chimeral imprint on this. And then you can use a Regal Orb and use a Played Arachnid to split it and essentially duplicate this exact jewel and then craft it from there infinitely. So that's kind of going to be like something. If you're interested in that, come swing by the stream. I'll explain it to you some more. But that's how I'm crafting these jewels. I think we have about 2 at the moment. Yeah, 2. Probably just easier to buy them if you can, but yeah, they're definitely pretty hard to make these Abyss Jewels, but when you get them on, they're about 20% more damage per jewel socket, so it's absolutely worth it to get it. They're just very difficult to craft. Other than that though, the character has worked out pretty well. I will make a quick note here though, if you're struggling with the low life transition on mana reservation and you're following my path of building, I've got a new gem setup for you guys, which is going to help you guys out with fitting everything in. That'll be in the description. You can just check out that path of building here. I've essentially shuffled a few gems around to make it a bit easier to fit all the auras with blood magic and stuff like that. So you guys can check that out if you're interested in that one. So that's going to be kind of the update on the summoner. Let's dive into the crafting guide I've made for you guys with Elishar's help. Elishar is the man behind all the gear. I'm sure if you've watched the stream, you've heard a little bit about him. So what do we got here? We've got 3 different recipes for you guys to follow. All of them include harvest to create this gear, but of course, getting this gear is going to be pretty easy with it. So let's start off with the clusters. I got a budget version and a perfect version. Let's go over the budget version quickly. So the budget version just includes getting 8 passive minion damage large clusters with item level 75 plus. To get a 2 passive renewal plus vicious bite, which is the entry level, you can pretty much do all content on those cluster jewels. All you'll need to do is reforge critical. The reason this is so powerful is because Vicious Bite is the only critical strike modifier on these jewels. And when you reforge, you're pretty much guaranteed to get it every single time. So you just spam reforges until you hit the renewal. And then you've got the Vicious Bite already on there, and it's super duper good. We have an option here for the ultimate endgame. If you're looking for perfect cluster jewels, you can follow that one off. But you know, for everyone else, pretty much the budget should be pretty good, and you can get it in just a few harvests. Not too bad. We've also got a step-by-step guide here for crafting the helmet I'm wearing right now, which is a pretty awesome mana reservation Abyssal Socket helmet. It's going to give you a lot more damage and juice. But you know, you can check this one out if you're interested in crafting the helmet. It's a step-by-step guide. If you need more advice, swing by the stream. You know, we can answer some questions there. And then next up, we also have the amulet I'm wearing, which has Pride Reservation and +2 to all skill gems. In order to use this though, you will need some of those Abyss Jewels we talked about earlier to avoid being stunned, and the helmet with the craft to allow you to not be stunned either. That's kind of going to be the combo, guys. Sum it up. What do I think about carrying golems? An absolute fantastic build for a summoner playstyle. It lets you get down the bosses without needing too much min-max micro kind of the character. You know, a lot of people have been having a lot of success with it. If your goal is to slay Maven, if you can get to a low life carrying golem build with the gem setups correct, you're more than likely going to be able to take her down, along with most of the other endgame boss encounters. And if you push it a bit further, you're absolutely going to be able to get all the invitations down as well. And it's a really good character for that kind of content. I've really enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys have too, and if you got any questions about the crafting or anything like that, definitely chuck as a comment or chuck down, come down by the stream. With all that said though, hope you guys have enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.